What if the strongest thing you ever did wasn't fighting harder, pushing more, or proving yourself to everyone who doubted you? What if your greatest power came from the moment you simply turned around and walked away? Think about it. Right now, there's probably something in your life draining you. Maybe it's a relationship that stopped serving you years ago. Maybe it's a job that's crushing your spirit. Maybe it's an argument you keep having with someone who will never see your side. And you're still there, still engaged, still trying to make it work. Why? Because somewhere along the way, you were told that quitting is weakness, that walking away means you failed, that real strength means staying and fighting through everything. But here's what nobody tells you. Sometimes the battle itself is the problem. Sometimes the fight you're in isn't worth winning. And sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stop playing the game entirely. I'm about to share something with you that changed everything for me, and I've watched it transform countless lives. It's a simple truth that sounds almost too easy. But living it? That's where the real work begins. Walking away isn't running. It's not giving up. It's not weakness. Walking away is the ultimate act of self-respect. It's you saying, my peace matters more than this chaos. My energy is too valuable to waste here. I deserve better, and I'm choosing better. Over the next hour, we're going to completely reimagine how you think about boundaries, energy, and what it truly means to protect yourself. You're going to learn why the people who walk away are actually the strongest ones in the room, how to know when it's time to leave a situation, and most importantly, how to do it without guilt, without doubt, and without looking back. By the end of this, you'll move differently. You'll set boundaries you never thought you could set. You'll release people and situations that have been holding you hostage. And you'll finally understand that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. Let's start with why this matters so much right now. Chapter 1. Why staying too long is actually the weakness. Here's something that might challenge everything you've been taught. Endurance isn't always admirable. Persistence isn't always noble. And staying in situations that hurt you doesn't make you strong. It makes you stuck. We live in a culture that glorifies the grind. We celebrate people who never give up. We admire those who keep pushing through pain, who refuse to quit no matter what. And look, there's absolutely a place for perseverance. But here's the critical distinction nobody talks about. There's a massive difference between persevering towards something meaningful and simply enduring something harmful. When you stay in a toxic job because you think leaving makes you a quitter, that's not strength. That's fear dressed up as loyalty. When you remain in a relationship that consistently disrespects you because you've invested so much time, that's not commitment. That's the sunk cost fallacy destroying your well-being. When you keep arguing with people who will never hear you because you need to be right, that's not principle. That's ego at the expense of your peace. Let me tell you about my friend Marcus. Brilliant guy, genuinely talented at what he does. He worked at this company for 7 years. 7 years of being overlooked for promotions. 7 years of watching less qualified people get elevated past him. 7 years of his ideas being dismissed in meetings only to be presented by someone else weeks later as if they were original thoughts. And Marcus stayed. Why? Because he told himself that leaving would mean those 7 years were wasted. Because he convinced himself that if he just worked a little harder, proved himself a little more, eventually they'd see his value. because walking away felt like admitting defeat. You know what happened? He burned out completely. His health deteriorated. His relationship suffered because he brought that frustration home every single day. His creativity died because he stopped believing his ideas mattered. And the company? They replaced him within 2 weeks when he finally left, and barely anyone noticed he was gone. The tragedy isn't that Marcus left. The tragedy is that he stayed 3 years longer than he should have, sacrificing his peace, his health, and his potential for a place that never valued him anyway. This pattern plays out everywhere. The person who stays in the friendship where they're always giving but never receiving. The parent who keeps trying to earn love from a child who's chosen estrangement. The entrepreneur who pours everything into a failing business idea because admitting it's not working feels like personal failure. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your willingness to endure doesn't earn you respect. It doesn't prove your character. What it actually does is teach people that you'll accept poor treatment. It signals that your boundaries are negotiable. It shows that you value their approval more than your own well-being. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. Are they the ones who tolerate everything? The ones who never walk away? Or are they the people who have clear boundaries, who know their worth, who aren't afraid to remove themselves from situations that don't serve them? Real strength isn't about how much you can take. It's about knowing when you've had enough and having the courage to act on that knowledge. It's about valuing yourself enough to leave spaces where you're not valued. It's about understanding that your time, your energy, and your peace are finite resources that deserve protection. The most empowering thing I ever learned was this. You don't owe anyone your presence in situations that diminish you. You don't owe anyone your energy in relationships that drain you. You don't owe anyone your time in spaces that disrespect you, and you absolutely don't need permission to protect your peace. But walking away isn't just about leaving. It's about what you're walking toward. Every time you remove yourself from something that hurts you, you create space for something that helps you. Every toxic relationship you release opens room for genuine connections. Every soul-crushing commitment you end frees up energy for pursuits that actually fulfill you. The question isn't, am I strong enough to stay? The real question is, am I wise enough to leave? And that wisdom, that self-awareness, that courage to choose yourself, that's where real power lives. So if you're in something right now that's consistently taking more than it gives, if you're exhausted from fighting battles that never should have been yours, if you're tired of trying to make people see your worth, I want you to consider this. What if the strongest thing you could do is simply walk away? Chapter 2. The Energy Audit. What's actually costing you. Before you can walk away from what's draining you, you need to identify what's actually taking your energy. Most people don't realize how much they're giving away until they stop and take inventory. So let's do that right now. Let's conduct an energy audit of your life. Energy isn't abstract. It's real, measurable, and finite. You wake up every day with a certain amount of physical, emotional, and mental energy. Everything you do either adds to that energy or depletes it. The problem? Most of us are operating at an energy deficit without even realizing it because we've normalized exhaustion. Here's how to identify what's draining you. Start by paying attention to how you feel after interactions. Not during them, after them. Some people leave you feeling lighter, more inspired, more like yourself. Others leave you feeling drained, anxious, or somehow smaller. That feeling isn't random, it's information. I used to have this colleague, Rachel. Super friendly, always wanted to grab coffee and catch up. And I'd go because, why not, right? She seemed nice enough. But I started noticing something. Every single time we'd meet, I'd leave feeling exhausted. Not tired like I'd had a productive conversation, exhausted like I'd just run a mental marathon. I finally paid attention to what was actually happening in those conversations. Rachel never asked about my life. Every coffee date was her venting about the same problems, asking for advice she'd never take, creating drama where none existed, and feeding off my emotional reactions. I was her unpaid therapist, her audience, her energy source, and she was draining me dry without either of us consciously acknowledging it. When I started declining those coffee invitations and limiting our interactions to work-related conversations, guess what happened? I had more energy, my days felt lighter, I stopped carrying her emotional baggage as if it were mine. That's when I realized not all connection is nourishing. Sometimes what looks like friendship is actually extraction. So let's get specific. Grab a mental notepad and honestly assess these areas. Relationships. Go through the key people in your life. Not whether you love them or whether they're good people, but how you actually feel after spending time with them. Do you feel energized or depleted? Seen or invisible? Supported or judged? This applies to family, friends, romantic partners, everyone. Work commitments. Which aspects of your work give you energy and which drain you? This isn't about whether work is hard. Hard work that's meaningful can be energizing. But are there meetings that are consistently pointless? Projects that go nowhere? Responsibilities that could be handled by someone else but somehow became yours? Digital consumption. How do you feel after scrolling social media, after reading news, after engaging in online discussions? We vastly underestimate how much energy we give to digital spaces. That argument you had with a stranger on the internet, that cost you real energy that could have gone to something that actually matters in your life. Obligations. What are you doing out of guilt rather than genuine desire? The committee you're on because you felt bad saying no. The event you attend because you're supposed to. The favor you keep doing because you've always done it. Obligation without authentic investment is an energy vampire. Mental loops. What thoughts are you repeating that don't serve you? Replaying past conversations, worrying about worst-case scenarios, obsessing over what someone else thinks of you? Mental energy drain is just as real as physical exhaustion, and it's often invisible until you start paying attention. Here's what I discovered when I did my first honest energy audit. I was giving the majority of my energy to things and people that gave me nothing in return. I was exhausted, not because I was doing too much, but because I was doing too much of the wrong things. The committee I'd been on for 3 years, I attended out of obligation, contributed minimally because I didn't really care about the mission, and left every meeting feeling like I'd wasted 2 hours. Gone. The group chat that was 90% complaints and drama, muted, then eventually left. The family member who called only to criticize my life choices, boundaries set, conversations limited. And here's what's beautiful about this process. When you remove what drains you, you don't just stop losing energy. You actually gain it back. You discover capacity you forgot you had. You find yourself having time and energy for things that genuinely matter to you. But here's the hard part that nobody warns you about. Some of what's draining you will be wrapped in love, obligation, or history. It might be a friendship that's run its course, but you've known each other since childhood. A family dynamic that's unhealthy, but that's just how we are. A career path you've invested years in, but that's killing your spirit. This is where most people stop. Because identifying what needs to change is one thing. Actually making those changes? That requires courage most people aren't ready to access. It requires accepting that you can love someone and still need distance from them, that you can be grateful for what something was while recognizing it's no longer serving you, that you can honor your past choices while making different ones now. Your energy is the currency of your life. How you spend it determines the quality of your existence. And just like financial wealth, energy wealth requires intentional management. You can't just spend freely and hope there's something left at the end of the day. So take this audit seriously. Write it down if you need to. Be brutally honest about what's actually given you life and what's taking it. Because once you have that clarity, once you can see where your energy is actually going, then you can make conscious choices about where it should go instead. And that's when everything changes. That's when you move from being a victim of your circumstances to being the architect of your experience. That's when you start understanding that protecting your peace isn't about running from everything hard. It's about being selective about what you're willing to be hard for. Not everything deserves your energy. And learning to recognize the difference between what does and what doesn't, that's the foundation of walking away with purpose. Chapter 3. The Guilt Complex. Why walking away feels so wrong. Let me guess. Even as you're reading this, even as you're identifying what's draining you, there's this voice in your head. It's saying things like, but I can't just abandon them. What will people think? Maybe if I try a little harder. I'm being selfish. They need me. That voice, that's guilt. And it's probably the biggest obstacle between you and your peace. Here's what you need to understand about guilt. It's not always legitimate. Sometimes guilt is your conscience telling you you've done something wrong. But often, especially when it comes to boundaries and walking away, guilt is just conditioning. It's programming from a culture that taught you to prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own well-being. Let me break down where this guilt actually comes from, because once you see it clearly, it loses its power over you. Cultural conditioning. From childhood, most of us were taught that being a good person means being selfless, putting others first, not causing problems, being agreeable. We were rewarded for compliance and punished for setting boundaries. We learned that our value came from how useful we were to others, how much we sacrificed, how rarely we said no. This creates adults who genuinely believe that taking care of themselves is selfish, who feel guilty for having needs, who apologize for setting boundaries, who stay in harmful situations because leaving would make someone else uncomfortable, and making others uncomfortable feels morally wrong. The savior complex. Many of us were also taught, implicitly or explicitly, that we're responsible for other people's emotions and outcomes, that if someone is struggling, it's our job to fix it, that if someone is unhappy with us leaving, we should stay, that their pain is somehow our responsibility to manage. This is especially true if you grew up in a dysfunctional environment. Children in those situations often become caretakers. They learn to manage everyone else's emotions, to smooth over conflicts, to sacrifice their needs for family peace. And they carry that pattern into adulthood, becoming the person everyone leans on, the one who never says no, the eternal caretaker. Sunk cost thinking. The longer you've been in something, the guiltier you feel about leaving. I've already invested 3 years in this friendship. We've been together for so long. I've put so much into this career. So you stay, not because the present is working, but because leaving feels like declaring that the past was wasted. Fear of judgment. We're also terrified of how walking away will look to others. What will people say? Will they think I'm cold, unreliable, a quitter? So we stay in situations that hurt us because we're more afraid of external judgment than internal suffering. Here's my story about guilt. I had a friend, Daniel, who I'd known for over a decade. We'd been through a lot together. Early career struggles, relationship drama, family stuff, real friendship history. But somewhere along the way, Daniel changed. Or maybe I did. Or maybe we both did and just grew in different directions. The friendship became one-sided. I was always the one reaching out, the one making plans, the one showing up for his crises. And when I had challenges, he was nowhere to be found. Conversations became him talking about himself for an hour, then having to run before I could share anything about my life. I knew it wasn't working anymore. I knew it was draining me. But the guilt of ending a decade-long friendship felt overwhelming. We had history. He'd been there for me when I needed him years ago. What kind of person throws away 10 years of friendship? So I kept trying, kept making excuses for him, kept hoping it would go back to how it used to be. Until one day, I realized something crucial. I wasn't maintaining a friendship out of love. I was maintaining it out of guilt. And that's not friendship. That's obligation. When I finally created distance, when I stopped being the one to always reach out, when I let the friendship naturally fade to occasional check-ins rather than constant engagement, the guilt was intense for weeks. But you know what else happened? I had energy again. I had time for friendships that were reciprocal. I stopped feeling resentful about giving so much and getting so little back. And Daniel? He barely noticed. He moved on to other people who would give him the attention he wanted, which confirmed what I'd been afraid to admit. I'd been far more invested in that friendship than he had been for a long time. Here's what I learned about guilt. It's often wildly disproportionate to the actual situation. The guilt you feel about setting a boundary is usually far more intense than the actual consequence of setting it. The guilt about walking away from something unhealthy is typically worse than the reality of walking away. Legitimate guilt happens when you've genuinely wronged someone, when you've broken a real commitment, when you've acted against your values. That guilt serves a purpose. It prompts you to make amends, to correct your behavior, to grow. False guilt happens when you've simply prioritized your well-being, when you've set a reasonable boundary, when you've made a choice that disappoints someone but doesn't harm them. This guilt serves no purpose except to keep you stuck. The person who feels guilty about leaving a toxic relationship isn't experiencing legitimate guilt. They're experiencing conditioning that tells them other people's feelings are more important than their safety. The employee who feels guilty about quitting a job that's destroying their mental health isn't betraying their employer. They're choosing survival over servitude. So how do you work through this guilt? First, by recognizing it for what it is, a feeling, not a fact. Just because you feel guilty doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Second, by asking yourself, if my best friend was in this exact situation, would I tell them they should stay? Usually, the answer is no. We give better advice to others than we give ourselves because we're not drowning in their guilt. Third, by remembering that you are not responsible for other people's reactions to your boundaries. If someone gets angry because you set a limit, that's information about them, not evidence that your limit was wrong. If someone tries to manipulate you with guilt, after everything I've done for you, that's exactly why the boundary is necessary. And finally, by understanding that walking away from what hurts you isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. And self-preservation isn't selfish, it's essential. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot sacrifice your peace indefinitely and expect to remain whole. At some point, choosing others over yourself doesn't make you noble. It makes you a martyr. And martyrdom doesn't actually help anyone. The people who truly care about you will understand when you need to create distance or leave entirely. They might be disappointed, but they won't try to guilt you into staying. The people who react with manipulation, anger, or punishment when you set boundaries, that reaction is exactly why the boundary was needed. So if you're carrying guilt about a boundary you need to set or a situation you need to leave, I want you to ask yourself this: am I protecting someone else's comfort at the expense of my survival? Because if the answer is yes, that guilt is a prison, not a compass. And you hold the key to your own freedom. Chapter 4. Recognizing the Signs. When it's time to walk. One of the most common questions I get is, how do I know when it's actually time to walk away versus when I should keep trying? And I get it. That line can feel blurry, especially when you're in the middle of the situation. But here's the truth. Your body and your gut already know the answer. You're just not listening to them yet. Walking away isn't usually a sudden decision. It's the culmination of dozens or hundreds of smaller moments where something felt off, but you ignored it. Moments where your intuition whispered, "This isn't right," but your logic argued, "Give it more time." Moments where your body tensed up, but your mind said, "You're being dramatic. Let me share the signs that it's time to walk," not the dramatic signs. Betrayal, abuse, obvious harm. Those make the decision clear, even if not easy. I'm talking about the subtle signs, the ones that are easy to rationalize away, but that, when accumulated, paint a clear picture. Sign 1. You're constantly making excuses for the situation or person. If you find yourself repeatedly explaining away behavior, justifying why something isn't that bad, or convincing yourself that things will get better eventually, pay attention. This is you trying to override your instincts with rationalization. My friend Jasmine did this for years with her business partner, Travis. Travis would miss deadlines. She'd say he was just overwhelmed. He'd fail to follow through on commitments. She'd explain that he had a lot going on. He'd make decisions without consulting her despite their partnership agreement, and she'd justify it as him being proactive. The thing is, Jasmine had to tell this story constantly, to herself, to me, to other people, because deep down she knew the partnership wasn't working. The constant explaining was her trying to drown out her own knowing. When she finally walked away, the relief was immediate. She'd been carrying the mental burden of constant justification, and it had been exhausting. Sign 2. You feel consistently drained rather than energized. Remember the energy audit from Chapter 2? This is where it matters. If a situation or relationship leaves you feeling depleted more often than not, that's your system telling you something is wrong. Occasional tiredness is normal. Life is hard. Relationships require work. Challenges drain us temporarily. But consistent depletion? That's not normal. That's your energy being extracted without adequate replenishment. And no amount of self-care baths and meditation apps can fix a situation that's fundamentally extractive. Sign 3. You've communicated your needs clearly and nothing has changed. This is crucial. Walking away without ever expressing what you need isn't fair to anyone. But once you clearly, directly communicated what doesn't work for you and the pattern continues, that's information. If you've told your friend that last-minute cancellations hurt you and they keep doing it, they're showing you that your feelings aren't a priority. If you've explained to your manager that the workload is unsustainable and nothing changes, they're showing you that your well-being doesn't matter to them. If you've asked your partner to stop a specific behavior that hurts you and they continue, they're showing you who they are. Believe them. Sign 4. You're becoming someone you don't recognize or respect. This is one of the most telling signs. When you notice yourself acting in ways that contradict your values, maybe you're more anxious, more cynical, more defensive, more closed off, the situation is changing you, and not for the better. I watched this happen with my brother Nathan in his relationship with his girlfriend Vanessa. Nathan had always been this easygoing, optimistic guy, fun to be around, generous with his time, quick to laugh. But after 2 years with Vanessa, he was different, tense, irritable, always checking his phone anxiously, making excuses for not hanging out with friends and family. We all noticed it, but he couldn't see it. Until one day he snapped at our mom over something trivial, and she said gently, "Nathan, you're not yourself anymore." That hit him. He realized he'd been so consumed with managing Vanessa's moods, with walking on eggshells to avoid her anger, with trying to be whoever she needed him to be that day, that he'd lost himself completely. The relationship was turning him into someone anxious, reactive, and small. That's when he knew he had to leave. And within months of ending it, we got our brother back. Sign 5. You dread it more than you look forward to it. Pay attention to your anticipatory emotions. Do you feel excited about seeing this person or dread it? Do you look forward to going to work? Or do you feel sick every Sunday night? Does the thought of an upcoming event energize you or fill you with anxiety? If dread is your dominant feeling more often than not, that's your system trying to protect you. Listen to it. Sign 6. You've tried everything and nothing works. There's a difference between not trying and trying everything. If you've genuinely put in effort, adjusted your approach, sought outside help, had difficult conversations, given it time, and the situation hasn't improved, at some point continuing to try is just stubbornness, not dedication. I spent 2 years trying to make a career path work. I read every book, took courses, found mentors, adjusted my strategy, worked harder, worked smarter, and I was miserable. The work didn't align with my strengths, didn't fulfill me, didn't come naturally no matter how much I tried to force it. My mentor finally asked me, "What if this just isn't your path? What if all this effort is trying to make something work that's fundamentally not right for you?" That question changed everything. I'd been so focused on not being a quitter that I couldn't see I was just in the wrong place. Sign 7. The cost is becoming too high. Every choice has a cost. Staying in something has a cost. Leaving has a cost. The question is, which cost can you afford? If staying is costing you your health, your other relationships, your peace of mind, your sense of self, at some point that cost becomes too high. A client of mine, David, stayed in a high-stress job because it paid well. He told himself he could handle it, that the money was worth it, that he just needed to get through the next project, the next quarter, the next year. Then he had a heart attack at 43. Suddenly, the cost was undeniable. No amount of money is worth your life. Sign 8. You know, and you're just looking for permission. Here's the most important sign. Deep down, you already know what you need to do. You know this relationship isn't right. You know this job is killing you. You know this situation has to change. But you're waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to leave, to give you permission, to confirm that, yes, it's bad enough to warrant walking away, so let me be that person. If you've read this far, if you're relating to these signs, if there's a specific situation that's been on your mind this entire time, you already know. Trust that knowing. You don't need permission, but if you want it, here it is. It's okay to walk away. It's more than okay. It might be exactly what you need to do. One final thing about recognizing when it's time to walk, it's rarely one big moment. It's usually an accumulation. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's the weight of carrying something that's become too heavy. And the moment you recognize that weight, the moment you acknowledge it's okay to put it down, that's the moment everything shifts. You don't need a dramatic breaking point to justify leaving. You don't need to wait until something is objectively unbearable. If it's unbearable to you, that's enough. Your experience is valid. Your limits are valid, and your decision to honor those limits is valid. Chapter 5. The Art of Boundaries. Drawing lines that hold. Before you can walk away from what doesn't serve you, you need to understand boundaries, because walking away is often the ultimate boundary, but it's not always the first or only option. Sometimes the right boundary creates enough space that walking away isn't necessary. Sometimes. Let's talk about what boundaries actually are, because most people misunderstand them. Boundaries aren't about controlling other people. They're not threats. They're not punishments. Boundaries are simply the limits you set to protect your well-being. They're the fence around your garden, defining where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins. Here's what boundaries sound like in practice. I'm not available for phone calls after 9 p.m. I don't discuss my personal life at work. I need 24 hours notice for plans, or I can't commit. I don't lend money to friends or family. I leave conversations where I'm being yelled at. Notice the structure. These aren't requests. They're not asking for permission or negotiating. They're statements of what you will and won't do. This is critical, because weak boundaries are really just hopes disguised as limits. A weak boundary sounds like, I wish you wouldn't call me so late. A strong boundary sounds like, I don't answer calls after 9 p.m. If it's an emergency, text me first. See the difference? One is wishing someone else would change. The other is defining your behavior, regardless of what they do. My friend Keisha learned this the hard way with her mother, Linda. Linda had a habit of dropping by Keisha's apartment unannounced, sometimes multiple times a week. And Keisha hated it. She'd complain to friends, feel resentful, but never actually set a boundary. Why? Because she didn't want to hurt her mother's feelings. One day I asked Keisha, what do you actually want? She said, I want her to call first. So I asked, have you told her that? She said yes, multiple times. But here's the thing, Keisha had never enforced it. She'd say, Mom, I wish you'd call first. But then she'd still answer the door every time Linda showed up unannounced. So Linda had no reason to change. From her perspective, Keisha would sometimes complain, but always let her in anyway. The complaint was just noise, not a real boundary. When Keisha finally set a real boundary, Mom, from now on, I need you to call before coming over. If you show up without calling, I won't answer the door. And then actually followed through by not answering the door the next time Linda showed up unannounced. Everything changed. Was Linda upset? Absolutely. Did she try the after everything I've done for you guilt trip? You bet. But Keisha held the line. And after a few times of realizing Keisha meant it, Linda started calling first. The relationship actually improved because the resentment Keisha had been carrying disappeared. Here's what makes boundaries so hard. They require you to prioritize your needs even when it disappoints others. They require you to tolerate someone else's discomfort with your limits. They require you to follow through even when it's easier to cave. Most people set boundaries but don't enforce them. They say what they need, but then make exceptions, explain it away, or give in when someone pushes back. This actually makes things worse because now you've trained people that your boundaries aren't real, that if they push hard enough or make you feel guilty enough, you'll fold. Real boundaries require three things. Clarity. Be specific about what the boundary is. I need more respect is vague. I don't accept being spoken to in a condescending tone if it happens. I'll end a conversation is clear. Consistency. Enforce the boundary every time, not just when you're in the mood. If your boundary is that you don't work weekends, but then you do it sometimes, just this once, you've taught people that your boundary is negotiable. Consequences. This is what most people miss. A boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. I don't accept being yelled at, so if it happens, I leave the conversation includes the consequence. I wish you wouldn't yell at me has no consequence. So there's no reason for the behavior to change. Now, here's where boundaries intersect with walking away. Sometimes the boundary itself is walking away. Sometimes the limit you set is, this relationship/job/situation doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm removing myself from it. And sometimes setting smaller boundaries reveals that the situation is actually unsalvageable. When you set a boundary and someone consistently violates it, when they argue with your right to have limits, when they try to manipulate or guilt you out of maintaining those limits, that's information. That's them showing you they don't respect your needs. And that's when walking away might be the only boundary left to set. I had a client, Robert, who was trying to set boundaries with a business associate, Marcus, who constantly called him at all hours, expected immediate responses to non-urgent messages, and got hostile when Robert wasn't available. Robert tried setting limits. I'm available for business conversations between 9 and 5 on weekdays. Marcus ignored it. Robert tried again, more firmly. Marcus accused him of being unprofessional and not committed. Finally, Robert realized Marcus wasn't going to respect any boundary because Marcus didn't see Robert as a person with legitimate needs. He saw Robert as a resource to be used. At that point, the only boundary left was to end the business relationship entirely, which Robert did, and his stress levels plummeted. Here's what I want you to understand about boundaries. They're not mean. They're not selfish. They're not optional. Boundaries are how you teach people how to treat you. They're how you protect your energy, your peace, your capacity to be present for what actually matters. People who truly care about you will respect your boundaries even when they don't like them. They might be disappointed, they might have to adjust their expectations, but they'll honor your limits because they value you as a person, not just what you do for them. People who don't respect your boundaries are showing you something crucial. They value their access to you more than they value your well-being. And those are exactly the people you most need boundaries with. So start small if you need to. Pick one boundary that matters to you and commit to holding it consistently. Notice who respects it and who fights it. Notice how it feels to prioritize your needs. Notice the shift in your relationships when you stop being endlessly flexible and start having actual limits. And remember, setting boundaries doesn't make you difficult. It makes you self-aware. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sustainable. It doesn't push people away. It filters out the people who are only there to take, and it makes room for relationships built on mutual respect. Sometimes boundaries save relationships, and sometimes they clarify that the relationship isn't salvageable. Either way, they protect you. And that protection is the foundation of everything else we're building here. Chapter 6, The Transition, How to Actually Walk Away. Knowing you need to walk away and actually doing it are two completely different challenges. You can have perfect clarity, strong boundaries, and zero guilt, and still struggle with the logistics and emotions of actually leaving. So let's talk about how to do this in a way that protects you and honors your integrity. First, understand that there are different types of walking away, and each requires a different approach. The clean break. This is for situations that are clearly harmful or where gradual distance isn't realistic. Toxic romantic relationships, abusive dynamics, jobs that are damaging your mental health. These require a decisive exit. You make the decision, you communicate it clearly, and you leave. No drawn-out goodbyes, no let's stay friends, no leaving the door open for future maybes. The slow fade. This works for relationships that aren't harmful, but have run their course. Old friendships that no longer align. Acquaintances who drain your energy. You gradually reduce contact, take longer to respond, decline more invitations, until the relationship naturally settles into occasional or no contact. The boundary reset. Sometimes you don't need to leave entirely, but you need to fundamentally change the terms of engagement. This might be a family relationship where you shift from weekly dinners to monthly check-ins, or a friendship where you're no longer their emotional support system, but can still grab coffee occasionally. Let me walk you through each approach with real examples. The clean break is what my friend Alicia had to do with her boyfriend, Jordan. The relationship had become emotionally manipulative. Jordan would apologize after fights, promise to change, and then repeat the same patterns. Alicia tried boundaries, tried communication, tried therapy. Nothing worked because Jordan didn't actually want to change. He just wanted her to stay. When Alicia finally decided to leave, she prepared. She moved her important belongings to a friend's place gradually. She secured her own apartment. She prepared what she would say. And then she had one conversation. This relationship isn't working for me. I've tried to fix it, and I can't. I'm done. I need you to respect my decision and not contact me." Then she left. Jordan tried everything: the apologies, promises, showing up at her workplace, recruiting mutual friends to convince her to give him another chance. But Alicia held firm. She blocked his number, blocked him on all social media, asked mutual friends not to share information about her with him. It was hard. She grieved, but she didn't waver. 6 months later, she told me it was the best decision she'd ever made. The clarity and peace of a clean break, the finality of it, allowed her to actually heal instead of being stuck in the cycle of breaking up and getting back together that had defined the previous year. The slow fade is what I did with a friendship that had become one-sided. Emma and I had been close in our 20s, but as we hit our 30s, we wanted different things from life and from friendship. She wanted a party buddy who would drop everything to go out. I wanted deeper, more intentional connection and had different priorities. I didn't want a dramatic friendship breakup. There was no betrayal, no big issue. We'd just grown apart. So I stopped being the one to initiate plans. When she reached out, I'd respond, but wouldn't be immediately available. I'd say yes to occasional hangouts, but no to weekly ones. Over time, we settled into seeing each other every few months at group events, having perfectly pleasant surface-level conversations. And that was enough. No hurt feelings, no confrontation, just a natural shift to the level of connection that actually worked for both of us. The boundary reset is what worked for my relationship with my father, Gregory. Growing up, Gregory had been critical and controlling. As an adult, I'd tried to maintain the relationship he wanted: frequent calls, regular visits, detailed updates about my life, but it was draining me. Every conversation left me feeling judged and inadequate. I finally decided I needed to change the terms. I told him, "Dad, I love you, but our current dynamic isn't healthy for me. I need some changes. I'll call you once a month to check in, and I'll visit on major holidays, but I'm not going to discuss my career choices, my relationships, or my lifestyle with you anymore. Those topics are off limits. If you bring them up, I'll end the conversation." He didn't take it well initially. He accused me of being disrespectful, of shutting him out. But I held the boundary, and gradually he adjusted. Our relationship now is limited, but functional. We can have surface-level conversations about neutral topics. It's not the close father-child relationship either of us might have wanted, but it's better than the toxic dynamic we had before or the complete estrangement that would have happened otherwise. So, how do you decide which approach to use? Ask yourself, is this situation actively harmful to me? Clean break. Has this relationship naturally run its course without major harm? Slow fade. Is there value in maintaining limited contact if boundaries are respected? Boundary reset. Once you've decided on your approach, here are the practical steps for actually walking away. Step 1. Get clear on your why. Write down why you're doing this, not for anyone else, for you. When guilt hits, when doubt creeps in, when the person tries to pull you back, you need to remember your reasons clearly. Step 2. Prepare practically. If you're leaving a job, save money first. If you're leaving a relationship, secure housing and move your belongings. If you're creating distance from someone, adjust your routines so you're not constantly running into them. Make the logistics easier, not harder. Step 3. Communicate clearly and briefly. Whether it's a conversation, a text, or a letter, be clear about your decision. Don't over-explain. Don't try to convince them. Don't seek their agreement or permission. State your decision as a fact, not a negotiation. Bad. I feel like maybe we shouldn't be friends anymore. I don't know. What do you think? Good. I've decided this friendship isn't working for me anymore, and I'm going to step back. Step 4. Expect pushback and prepare for it. People will try to change your mind. They'll apologize, make promises, guilt you, get angry, recruit others to their side. Decide in advance how you'll handle this. Usually, the answer is you don't engage. You restate your decision once if necessary, and then you disengage from further discussion. Step 5. Follow through. This is where most people fail. They make the decision, they have the conversation, and then they cave when the person pushes back or when they feel guilty. Don't. Following through is what makes walking away effective. Half leaving is worse than not leaving because now you're stuck in limbo. Step 6. Feel your feelings. Walking away, even when it's the right decision, hurts. You might feel grief, guilt, relief, doubt, sadness, anger, sometimes all at once. That's normal. Let yourself feel it without letting those feelings pull you back into the situation. You can grieve something and still know it was right to leave. Step 7. Protect your peace afterward. This might mean blocking numbers, unfollowing on social media, asking mutual friends not to share information, avoiding places you might run into the person. It might feel extreme, but protecting your peace requires creating actual space, not just emotional distance. One final critical point: walking away doesn't always look strong in the moment. Sometimes it looks messy. Sometimes you cry. Sometimes you doubt yourself. Sometimes people judge you for it. That's okay. The strength isn't in how gracefully you exit. The strength is in the exit itself. My friend Tanya left a prestigious career that was making her miserable. She'd built her entire identity around that career. When she quit, she had a breakdown, spent weeks crying, questioning everything, feeling lost. From the outside, it didn't look strong, but the strength was in recognizing she was on the wrong path and having the courage to step off it, even when she didn't know where the new path would lead. 2 years later, she'd rebuilt her life around work that actually fulfilled her. But those first months, they were hard, and that's okay. Walking away isn't about looking composed. It's about choosing yourself even when that choice is uncomfortable. So whatever you need to walk away from, know this: you can do it. It won't be perfect. It might be messy. But on the other side of that door you're closing is the space for something better to emerge. And you deserve that space. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. Navigating life after walking away. Here's what nobody tells you about walking away. The hard part isn't always the leaving. Sometimes the hard part is what comes after. The empty space where something used to be. The doubt that creeps in when you're not drowning in the chaos anymore. The identity crisis when you defined yourself by what you're walking away from. Let me be real with you. The aftermath can be brutal, and it's crucial that you understand this going in, because if you're not prepared for it, you'll be tempted to go back. You'll think, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe I made a mistake, maybe I can handle it. And before you know it, you're right back in the situation you had the courage to leave. The aftermath usually unfolds in stages. Understanding these stages helps you navigate them without panicking or backtracking. Stage 1. Immediate relief and euphoria. Right after you walk away, there's often this incredible lightness. The weight you've been carrying is gone. You can breathe again. You might feel proud, liberated, like you finally took control of your life. This phase is amazing. Enjoy it, because it doesn't last forever. Stage 2. The doubt. A few days or weeks later, the doubt arrives. Was I too harsh? Did I overreact? What if I could have made it work? What if this was a mistake? This is your brain's way of processing the change and trying to return to what's familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it's harmful. This is normal. Expect it. Stage 3. The loneliness and void. When something that took up significant space in your life is gone, whether it's a relationship, a job, a commitment, there's a void. And voids are uncomfortable. You have free time you didn't have before, emotional energy that's not being drained anymore, but you don't know what to do with it yet. This phase feels empty, and emptiness can be scary. Stage 4. The grief. Even when you walk away from something harmful, you can still grieve it. You grieve what it was supposed to be. You grieve the time you invested. You grieve the version of yourself that was connected to that thing. This grief is legitimate. Honor it. Stage 5. The rebuilding. Eventually, you start filling that empty space with things that actually serve you. New relationships, new pursuits, new versions of yourself. This is when you realize walking away wasn't an end. It was a beginning. But getting here requires moving through all the previous stages. Let me share how this played out for me when I walked away from a career path I'd been on for 8 years. I'd spent nearly a decade building expertise, reputation, and connections in a field that looked impressive on paper, but was destroying me internally. When I finally left, the initial relief was incredible. I felt free, lighter, like I could finally breathe. But 2 weeks later, the doubt hit hard. What had I just done? I'd thrown away 8 years of work. I'd walked away from financial security. I'd left a prestigious position to do what exactly? I didn't even have a clear alternative plan. The panic was intense. Then came the void. Suddenly, I had time, mental energy, but I didn't know what to do with it. I'd been so consumed by that career for so long that I'd forgotten who I was outside of it. I'd catch myself reaching for work that wasn't there anymore, checking emails that wouldn't come, thinking about problems that were no longer mine to solve. And the grief? Unexpected, but powerful. I wasn't grieving the job itself. I was genuinely relieved to be done with it. I was grieving the person I'd been when I started that career, full of ambition and certainty. I was grieving the 8 years I'd spent building something that ultimately wasn't right for me. I was grieving the simple clarity of knowing what I was supposed to be doing, even if I hated doing it. Getting through those stages required intentional strategies, and I want to share them with you because they work for any situation you've walked away from. Strategy 1. Remember your reasons. This is why I told you to write them down earlier. When doubt hits, you need to revisit why you left. Not to convince yourself it was right, you already know it was, but to ground yourself in that truth when your emotions are pulling you in another direction. I kept a note on my phone with the specific reasons I'd left that career. The panic attacks before work. The relationships I was neglecting. The person I was becoming. Cynical, exhausted, disconnected. When I was tempted to think I'd made a mistake, I'd read that list. It reminded me, no, this wasn't an overreaction. This was survival. Strategy 2. Resist the urge to fill the void immediately. When you walk away from something significant, there's enormous pressure, internal and external, to immediately replace it. You left a relationship? Jump into dating. You quit your job? Start applying everywhere. You ended a friendship? Find new friends immediately? Don't. Sit in the discomfort of the void for a while. This empty space is actually a gift. It's room to figure out what you actually want, not just what will fill the gap. It's time to rediscover yourself outside of what you walked away from. Rushing to fill it means you might just recreate the same pattern with different details. I gave myself 6 months after leaving that career before making any big decisions about what was next. Those months felt aimless sometimes, but that aimlessness allowed me to explore, to experiment, to remember what I actually enjoyed doing versus what I thought I should be doing. That space is what led me to the work I do now, work that actually aligns with who I am. Strategy 3. Build a support system that understands. Not everyone will get why you walked away. Some people will think you're crazy for leaving something that looked good from the outside. Some will project their own fears onto your decision. You need people around you who understand that walking away for your peace is valid, even when it doesn't make sense to everyone else. Find those people, whether it's friends, a therapist, a support group, online communities, people who will remind you that prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish when you're doubting yourself. Strategy 4. Process the grief without letting it pull you back. You can miss something and still know leaving was right. You can feel sad about how things turned out and still be glad you left. These feelings coexist. The key is processing the grief without interpreting it as evidence that you made a mistake. Journal about it. Talk about it. Cry about it if you need to. But don't let grief become a reason to return to something that wasn't working. Grief is part of moving forward, not a sign you should go backward. Strategy 5. Reclaim your identity. When you've been deeply invested in something, a relationship, a career, a role, it becomes part of your identity. When you walk away, you have to figure out who you are without it. This is hard, but essential. Ask yourself, who am I when I'm not in that relationship? What do I like when I'm not doing that job? What do I value when I'm not performing that role? These questions help you rebuild an identity that's rooted in yourself, not in external circumstances. Strategy 6. Set boundaries with people who want you to go back. There will be people who try to convince you to return to what you left. Sometimes they have good intentions, they care about you, and worry about your decision. Sometimes they have selfish motivations. Your leaving inconveniences them or challenges their own choices to stay in similar situations. Either way, you need boundaries. I appreciate your concern, but this decision is final. I need you to support me, not convince me to go back. And if they won't respect that boundary, limit contact with them until you're solid enough in your decision that their pressure doesn't affect you. Strategy 7. Document the progress. It's easy to focus on how hard the aftermath is and forget how far you've come. Keep track, even in small ways, of the positive changes. Maybe you're sleeping better. Maybe you're laughing more. Maybe you have energy for hobbies you'd abandoned. These shifts might seem minor, but they're evidence that walking away was the right choice. I started keeping a list of things I can do now after leaving that career. Small things like had dinner with a friend on a Tuesday or read a book for pleasure or didn't wake up with anxiety. Looking at that list when I doubted myself reminded me of what I'd gained by leaving. Now, I want to address something important. Sometimes the aftermath reveals that you need more help than you realized. If you walked away from something traumatic, if you're dealing with intense anxiety or depression, if you're having trouble functioning in your daily life, please get professional support. There's no shame in needing therapy or counseling to process what you've been through. Walking away was brave. Getting help to heal from it is equally brave. Finally, understand this. The aftermath gets easier. The doubt becomes less frequent. The void starts filling with things that actually nourish you. The grief softens. And one day, maybe months later, maybe a year later, you'll realize you haven't thought about what you walked away from in days, maybe weeks. You'll realize you're genuinely happy in ways you forgot were possible. That's when you know you're through it. That's when you know walking away wasn't just the right decision. It was the beginning of something better than you could have built while still holding on to what was hurting you. The aftermath is the price of admission to a better life. It's uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but it's temporary. What's on the other side? That's permanent, and it's worth every hard moment of getting there. Chapter 8. Protecting Your Peace. Daily Practices that reinforce your boundaries. Walking away is a single decision. Protecting your peace is a daily practice. One removes you from what harms you. The other ensures you don't end up back in similar situations or let new ones develop. Let's talk about the ongoing work of maintaining the boundaries and clarity that allowed you to walk away in the first place. The reality is, walking away once doesn't mean you've solved the underlying patterns that got you into that situation. If you don't develop the skills and awareness to protect your peace consistently, you'll find yourself in different versions of the same dynamic. Different people, different circumstances, but the same core pattern of giving away your power and sacrificing your well-being. Here are the daily practices that make protecting your peace sustainable. Practice 1. Morning check-ins with yourself. Before you do anything else, before you check your phone, before you engage with other people's needs, before you dive into your day, check in with yourself. How am I feeling? What do I need today? What's my energy level? What boundaries might I need to set today? This sounds simple, but most people skip it entirely. They wake up and immediately start reacting to the world. Notifications, obligations, other people's agendas, and by the time they pause to consider their own needs, they're already depleted. I do this every morning with my coffee. 5 minutes, that's it. Just sitting with myself and taking inventory. Some days I realize I'm already anxious about something, and I can address it proactively rather than letting it drive my behavior unconsciously. Some days I realize I'm low on energy, so I know to be more protective of my time. This simple practice prevents me from overcommitting or ignoring early warning signs that I need a boundary. Practice 2. The hell yes or no rule. This comes from entrepreneur Derek Sivers, and it's life-changing. When deciding whether to commit to something, an invitation, a project, a favor, anything that requires your time or energy, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Most people operate on, well, I guess I could, or I probably should, or it would be nice to. These lukewarm commitments drain you because you're doing things out of obligation rather than genuine desire. But when you commit only to things that genuinely excite you or deeply align with your values, you protect your energy for what actually matters. This doesn't mean you only do fun things. Sometimes a hell yes is hell yes. This aligns with my long-term goals, even though it's hard work. But it means you're not saying yes to things that feel like a burden from the moment you agree to them. Practice 3. Regular energy audits. Remember the energy audit from Chapter 2? Don't do it once and forget it. Make it a regular practice. Monthly or quarterly assess what's draining me, what's energizing me. Have new energy vampires entered my life? Am I maintaining the boundaries I set? Things change. New people enter your life. New commitments arise. Old patterns can creep back in if you're not paying attention. Regular audits catch these shifts before they become major problems. I schedule this into my calendar like any other important appointment. Last Sunday of every month, I spend an hour reviewing my commitments, relationships, and energy levels. If something has become consistently draining, I address it. Sometimes that's a conversation. Sometimes it's pulling back. Sometimes it's realizing I need to walk away from something new before it becomes entrenched. Practice 4. The 24-hour rule. Don't make major commitments or decisions when you're emotional, tired, or being pressured. Give yourself 24 hours to sit with it. This simple buffer prevents impulsive yeses that you'll regret later. Someone asks you to take on a project? Let me check my schedule and get back to you tomorrow. Someone wants you to join a committee? I need to think about whether I have capacity for that. Someone invites you to something that doesn't excite you? I'll check my calendar and let you know. This buffer does two things. It gives you time to honestly assess whether this is something you want to do, and it removes you from the pressure of the moment where saying no feels harder. Practice 5. Monitor your self-talk. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself, especially around boundaries and walking away. Are you still carrying guilt? Are you second-guessing yourself? Are you slipping into old patterns of prioritizing others over yourself? Your self-talk either reinforces your boundaries or erodes them. If you're constantly telling yourself, I'm being selfish when you set limits, or maybe I was too harsh when you walked away from something harmful, you're undermining your own protection. Counter negative self-talk with truth. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-care. Walking away from what hurt me was the right decision. I don't need to justify my needs to anyone. Practice 6. Cultivate relationships that support your growth. Protecting your peace isn't just about removing what drains you. It's about actively building relationships with people who respect your boundaries, support your decisions, and add to your life rather than depleting it. Invest time in friendships where you can be authentic, where you don't have to perform or manage someone else's emotions, where your boundaries are respected without argument, where you give and receive in balanced ways. These relationships become your foundation. When you have genuine, nourishing connections, it's easier to walk away from toxic ones because you're not desperate for any connection. Practice 7. Create rituals that ground you. Daily practices that reconnect you to yourself prevent you from losing yourself in other people's needs or expectations. This might be meditation, exercise, journaling, time in nature, creative pursuits, whatever genuinely centers you. For me, it's a daily walk without my phone, just me, moving, thinking, being present. That hour is non-negotiable. It's where I process emotions, solve problems, and maintain my connection to myself. When I skip it for too long, I notice I'm more reactive, more easily pulled into drama, less clear on my boundaries? Find what grounds you and protect that time fiercely. Practice 8. Say no without explanation. This is a skill that requires practice. Most people over-explain when they say no because they think they need to justify their boundaries. You don't. "No, I can't make it," is a complete sentence. "That doesn't work for me" requires no further explanation. The more you explain, the more you open yourself up to negotiation and guilt trips. "I can't make it because I have another commitment that night" gives someone room to say, "What commitment? Can you reschedule it?" This is important. But a simple "I can't make it" is final. Practice saying no kindly but firmly without defending your decision. It gets easier the more you do it. Practice 9. Protect your time like you protect your money. Most people are more careful with their money than with their time, but time is the more valuable resource. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. If someone asked to borrow $500 from you regularly without paying it back, you'd stop lending, right? Apply that same logic to your time and energy. If someone regularly takes more than they give, if commitments consistently feel like obligations rather than choices, it's okay to stop giving. Your time is your life. Spend it intentionally on what matters to you, not on what everyone else thinks should matter. Practice 10. Celebrate your boundaries. When you successfully hold a boundary, when you say no to something that would have drained you, when you protect your peace in a challenging situation, acknowledge it. Celebrate it. This reinforces the behavior. I keep a note on my phone where I track boundary wins. Decline that committee invitation without guilt. Left a conversation where I was being disrespected. Said no to working this weekend. Looking at this list reminds me that I'm building the skill of protecting myself, and I'm getting better at it. These practices aren't about becoming rigid or closed off. They're about being intentional, about ensuring that your life is shaped by your conscious choices rather than unconscious patterns, about maintaining the hard-won peace that came from walking away from what didn't serve you. Protecting your peace is an active practice, not a passive state. It requires attention, maintenance, and sometimes uncomfortable decisions. But it's how you ensure that walking away was just the beginning of building a life where you don't have to keep walking away because you're choosing better from the start. Chapter 9. What you gain. The unexpected gifts of walking away. Let's shift focus. We've spent a lot of time talking about the cost of walking away, the difficulty, the grief, the aftermath. But we need to talk about what you gain. Because walking away from what doesn't serve you isn't just about removal. It's about making space for something better. And that better often shows up in ways you never expected. When I walked away from that career that was destroying me, I knew what I was leaving. What I didn't know was what I was walking toward. I had no idea that leaving that path would open doors I didn't even know existed. I couldn't have predicted the relationships, opportunities, and versions of myself that only became possible because I created space for them. Here's what most people don't realize. You can't see what's on the other side of walking away until you actually walk away. You can't imagine the life that's waiting for you, because that life can only exist in the space currently occupied by what's draining you. You have to create the void before you can fill it with something better. So, what do you actually gain when you walk away? Let me break down the unexpected gifts that show up. Gift 1. You reclaim your energy. The most immediate gift is energy you forgot you had. When you're no longer giving everything to something that takes and takes, suddenly you have capacity, mental clarity, emotional bandwidth, physical vitality. And this energy can go toward things that actually matter to you. My friend Chloe experienced this dramatically when she left a friendship group that was constantly caught up in drama. Every gathering turned into therapy sessions for whoever had the latest crisis. Every text chain was somebody venting. Every interaction required managing someone's emotions. Chloe thought this was just what friendship was. Exhausting, but necessary. When she finally stepped back from that group, she was shocked by how much energy she had. Energy to pursue interests she'd abandoned. Energy to build deeper connections with people who weren't drama-focused. Energy to invest in her own growth rather than managing everyone else's chaos. She'd been so drained for so long that she'd forgotten what having actual energy felt like. Gift 2. You discover who you are without the thing you walked away from. When you've been defined by a relationship, a role, a career, or a commitment for a long time, you lose touch with yourself outside of it. Walking away forces you to rediscover who you are, what you like, what you value independent of that external identity. This can be disorienting at first, but it's ultimately liberating. You get to choose who you want to be, rather than being whoever that situation required you to be. Gift 3. You set a new standard for what you'll accept. Once you walk away from something that wasn't serving you, your tolerance for similar situations plummets. You've proven to yourself that you can leave, which means you're less likely to stay in future situations that don't meet your standards. This creates an upward spiral. You walk away from one toxic relationship, which raises your standards, which means you're less likely to enter another toxic relationship. You leave one soul-crushing job, which means you're more selective about the next one. Each act of walking away builds your capacity to protect your peace proactively. Gift 4. You inspire others to do the same. This one surprised me. I thought walking away was just about me. But I can't count how many people have told me that watching me leave that career gave them permission to consider their own exits from situations that weren't working. Your courage creates permission for others to be courageous too. When you walk away, especially from something that looks good from the outside, you challenge the narrative that you have to stay in things that hurt you just because they're prestigious, or because you've invested time, or because that's what's expected. You show people that choosing peace over prestige is valid, that sometimes the brave thing is to leave, not to stay. Gift 5. You open space for better relationships. This is huge when you're stuck in relationships that drain you, whether romantic, platonic, or familial. You don't have space for relationships that nourish you. You might meet amazing people, but you can't fully engage with them because your emotional and temporal resources are tied up in maintaining relationships that don't serve you. When you walk away from relationships that take more than they give, you create room for genuine connections, for people who see you, appreciate you, respect your boundaries, and add to your life rather than depleting it. And these relationships feel so different that you wonder why you tolerated the old ones for so long. Gift 6. You learn to trust yourself. Every time you recognize something isn't working and you act on that recognition, you build self-trust. You prove to yourself that you can read situations accurately, that you can make hard decisions, that you can follow through even when it's uncomfortable. This self-trust becomes the foundation for everything else in your life. Before I walked away from that career, I doubted myself constantly, second-guessed every decision, looked to others for validation and direction, walking away, trusting my gut that something was wrong even when I couldn't fully articulate it, following through despite doubt and external pressure. That built a level of self-trust I'd never had before. Now, when my intuition tells me something isn't right, I listen, because I've proven to myself that I can trust that inner knowing. Gift 7. You become ungovernable to manipulation. Once you've walked away from something significant, manipulation tactics that might have worked before lose their power. Guilt trips, gaslighting, pressure, threats. When you've proven to yourself that you can leave, these tactics become transparent and ineffective. Someone tries to guilt you into staying. You remember, guilt isn't reason enough. Someone threatens to withdraw love or approval if you set a boundary. You remember, conditional approval isn't love. Someone tries to make you doubt your perception. You remember, my experience is valid and I trust myself. Walking away gives you immunity to the control tactics that keep people stuck in harmful situations. Gift 8. You create a life that's actually yours. This is the ultimate gift. When you walk away from what doesn't serve you, when you set boundaries around what will and won't be part of your life, when you choose your peace over others' expectations, you start building a life that reflects your actual values, desires, and needs rather than what you think you're supposed to want. This life might look different than you expected. It might not be what your family envisioned for you or what society says success should look like, but it's yours, authentically, genuinely yours. And that alignment between who you are and how you're living creates a sense of peace that no external achievement can match. I look at my life now versus 5 years ago, and they're almost unrecognizable, not because of external success, though things are good, but because of internal alignment. The relationships in my life are genuine. The work I do matters to me. The boundaries I have are honored. The energy I have goes toward things I've chosen, not obligations I've accumulated. Could I have built this life without walking away? No, because this life could only exist in the space created by removing what didn't serve me. Every no I said, every boundary I set, every situation I walked away from was creating room for what I actually wanted, even when I didn't fully know what that was yet. So if you're on the edge of walking away from something, if you're afraid of what you'll lose, I want you to also consider what you'll gain. Not just the absence of pain, but the presence of peace. Not just freedom from what's wrong, but space for what's right. Not just ending something that hurt you, but beginning something that helps you become who you're meant to be. The gifts of walking away aren't immediate. You won't feel all of them the day you leave. But over time, they compound, they build, and one day you'll look back and realize that walking away wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of everything that came after. Chapter 10. When walking away isn't possible, boundaries within captivity. Let's talk about something important. Sometimes, walking away isn't immediately possible. You might be financially dependent on a job you hate. You might have children that tie you to a co-parenting relationship with someone toxic. You might have family obligations that can't be immediately severed. You might be in a situation where the practical barriers to leaving are real and significant. This doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you need a different strategy. You need to learn how to protect your peace within situations you can't leave yet. You need boundaries within captivity. First, let me be clear. If you're in immediate physical danger, if there's abuse happening, disregard everything else and get out. Call a hotline. Reach out to services designed to help people escape dangerous situations. Safety first, always. This chapter is about situations that are harmful but not immediately dangerous. Situations where you're working toward an exit but can't execute it today. Here's the framework for maintaining your sanity and protecting your peace in situations you can't leave yet. Strategy 1. Name the reality without dramatizing it. There's power in clear-eyed acknowledgement. Don't pretend the situation is fine when it's not. But also, don't catastrophize it into something unbearable. The truth is probably, this situation isn't good for me and I'm working on a plan to change it. Until then, I need to manage it as best I can. Naming this reality prevents two traps. Denial, where you gaslight yourself into accepting the unacceptable, and despair, where you convince yourself there's no hope and give up entirely. The middle ground is, this is hard, and I'm handling it until I can change it. Strategy 2. Create micro-boundaries wherever possible. Even in situations where you can't create distance entirely, you can almost always create some boundaries. These might be smaller than you'd like, but they still protect you. Can't leave the job yet? Set boundaries around when you check email. Don't answer work calls during dinner. Use your lunch break to actually decompress instead of working through it. Take all your vacation days. These small boundaries create pockets of protection within an overall difficult situation. Can't create distance from a toxic family member? Limit the topics you'll discuss. Don't share personal information they'll use against you. Keep visits shorter. Have an exit strategy for every interaction so you can leave if things get too intense. Can't leave a draining friendship immediately because of shared social circles? Reduce one-on-one time. Show up to group events, but don't engage deeply. Be friendly, but not intimate. These micro-boundaries protect you while you navigate the complications. Strategy 3. Build your exit plan systematically. If you know you need to leave but can't do it immediately, work toward it methodically. Break it down into steps. What would need to be in place for you to leave? Money saved? A new job lined up? Housing secured? Skills developed? Start working on these pieces even while you're still in the situation. This serves two purposes. Practically, you're building the foundation for your exit. Psychologically, you're reminding yourself that this is temporary, that you're actively working toward change, that you're not helplessly stuck. I had a client, Teresa, who was in a miserable job, but couldn't quit without something else lined up because she had kids to support. For a full year, she stayed at that job while systematically building her exit. She networked, updated her skills, saved money, and applied for positions. That year was hard. But it wasn't hopeless because every week she was taking steps toward leaving. The day she gave notice, she'd built a bridge to something better. Strategy 4. Protect your internal world fiercely. When you can't control external circumstances, your internal world becomes even more important. Don't let the situation colonize your mind and emotions. Maintain parts of your life that are separate from the difficult situation. This might mean a creative hobby that has nothing to do with work. Friendships that aren't connected to the toxic relationship. Time in nature where you can disconnect from the drama. Therapy, where you can process what you're experiencing without judgment. These protected spaces preserve you. They remind you that you're more than this situation. They give you refuge when everything else feels overwhelming. Strategy 5. Document everything. If you're in a situation that might eventually involve legal action, HR involvement, custody disputes, or any formal process, document what's happening. Dates, times, what was said, what happened, who was present. Keep these records somewhere safe. This serves a practical purpose if you eventually need evidence, but it also serves a psychological purpose. When people gaslight you or minimize your experience, having a clear record of what actually happened helps you maintain your grip on reality. Strategy 6. Find your people. You need support from people who understand that you can't just leave, who won't judge you for staying while you build your exit, who will remind you that you're not crazy or weak for being in this situation. This might be a therapist, a support group, trusted friends who get it, not people who will tell you to just leave without understanding the complications. People who will support you in protecting yourself while acknowledging the constraints you're operating within. Strategy 7. Detach emotionally where you can. This is a skill that takes practice. When you can't physically remove yourself from something harmful, learning to detach emotionally provides a layer of protection. What does emotional detachment look like? It means not taking things personally, even when they're clearly directed at you. It means observing interactions as if you're a researcher studying a dysfunctional system, rather than being emotionally invested in every moment. It means recognizing that someone's toxic behavior is about them, not about you, even when they're directing it at you. This isn't about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about creating psychological distance that protects you from being destroyed by circumstances you can't immediately change. My friend Omar used this strategy with his emotionally abusive father while he was financially dependent during college. He couldn't move out yet, so he learned to hear his father's criticism and rage as noise rather than truth. He'd observe his father's outbursts with a sort of detached curiosity. There's the pattern where he escalates over something minor, instead of letting it destroy his self-worth. It wasn't perfect protection, but it helped him survive until he could leave. Strategy 8. Celebrate small wins. When you're stuck in a difficult situation, progress can feel impossibly slow. Celebrate the small victories. You set a boundary and held it? Win. You saved another $500 toward your exit fund? Win. You got through a difficult interaction without losing your center? Win. These celebrations remind you that you're not helpless, that you're actively managing the situation, that you're moving toward something better, even when it feels glacial. Strategy 9. Don't let the situation define you. This is crucial. When you're in something difficult for an extended period, there's a risk of it becoming your identity. You become the person stuck in the terrible job, or the person trapped in the toxic relationship. This cements the situation psychologically, even when you're working to change it practically. Maintain an identity that's separate from the difficult situation. Continue pursuing interests, building skills, nurturing relationships that have nothing to do with what you're trying to escape. This prevents the situation from swallowing your entire sense of self. Strategy 10. Remember that temporary isn't forever. When you're in the middle of something hard, especially when you can't see the end date clearly, it can feel permanent. Remind yourself regularly, this is temporary. You're building an exit. This won't be your reality forever. The constraints that make leaving difficult today won't necessarily exist a year from now, 2 years from now. This hope isn't denial. It's recognizing that circumstances change, that you're working to change them, and that enduring something temporarily while building an exit is different from accepting it permanently. Now, I want to acknowledge something uncomfortable. Sometimes, protecting your peace in a situation you can't leave requires accepting that you might not be able to fully protect it. Sometimes, the damage happens despite your best efforts at boundaries and detachment. If that's your experience, please don't blame yourself. You're doing your best in an impossible situation. The goal isn't perfect peace in an imperfect situation. The goal is survival with as much of yourself intact as possible until you can change your circumstances. And that's enough. You don't have to be zen about it. You don't have to make peace with it. You just have to get through it while actively working towards something better. And if you're reading this thinking, but I could leave, I'm just afraid, that's different from genuinely can't leave. Sometimes we tell ourselves we can't leave when what we really mean is leaving would be hard, or leaving would require changes I'm not sure I'm ready for. If that's you, be honest with yourself about whether the barriers are external constraints or internal resistance. Both are valid, but they require different approaches. Walking away when you can is courage. Surviving with boundaries when you can't is also courage. Both protect your peace in different ways. Know which situation you're in and act accordingly. Chapter 11. The Ripple Effect. How your peace changes everything around you. Here's something fascinating that happens when you start protecting your peace, setting boundaries, and walking away from what doesn't serve you. Other people notice, and they respond, sometimes positively, sometimes not. But your decision to prioritize your well-being creates ripples that extend far beyond your immediate experience. Let me explain what I mean. When you change how you show up in the world, you change the system you're part of. Families, workplaces, friend groups, communities, these are all systems with established dynamics. Everyone has a role. There are unspoken rules about how things work, who does what, who sacrifices for whom. When you suddenly refuse to play your assigned role, the peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who always says yes, the one who absorbs everyone else's emotions, the system has to adjust. And systems don't like adjustment. They resist change because the current setup, even if dysfunctional, is familiar. Pushback is a sign you're doing it right. If you start setting boundaries and everyone immediately celebrates and adjusts, the boundaries probably weren't necessary. But when people resist, guilt trip, accuse you of changing or being selfish, get angry, or try to pull you back into old patterns, that's actually confirmation that the boundaries were needed. Think about it. Who benefits from you having no boundaries? Who's served by you sacrificing your peace for everyone else? Not you. The pushback isn't about you being wrong. It's about them losing access to what they were taking from you. Let me share how this played out in my family. For years, I was the mediator. When my parents fought, I was the buffer. When my siblings had conflicts, I negotiated peace. When someone needed emotional support, I provided it. I was the family therapist, unpaid and unconsulted about whether I wanted the job. When I finally set boundaries, I'm not discussing this conflict between you and Dad. I can't be your emotional support for this. You need to work it out directly. I'm not available to mediate this. My family's reaction was not understanding. It was anger. I was accused of abandoning them, of being cold, of not caring about the family. The reality? I was just refusing to do the unpaid emotional labor I'd never agreed to. But because that labor had been expected for so long, my refusal felt like a betrayal to them. They weren't upset because I was doing something wrong. They were upset because I was no longer doing something for them. Here's what's critical to understand. When you change, you give everyone around you two choices. They can adjust to the new version of you, respecting your boundaries and meeting you where you are. Or they can refuse to adjust, in which case the relationship will likely end or fundamentally change. Both outcomes are information. The people who adjust are showing you they value you as a person, not just what you do for them. The people who refuse to adjust are showing you that their access to you was more important than your well-being. That's painful to discover, but it's necessary information. The positive ripple. Some people will respond to your boundaries and peace-protecting choices with respect, even admiration. They might follow your example. They might tell you that watching you prioritize yourself gave them permission to do the same. My friend Jennifer experienced this at work. She was the person who always stayed late, always took on extra projects, always said yes to helping coworkers, even at the expense of her own work. When she started setting boundaries, leaving at 5 p.m., saying no to non-essential requests, protecting her time, her manager was initially frustrated. But something interesting happened. 2 other team members started doing the same thing. They saw Jennifer prioritizing her well-being without getting fired or professionally damaged, and they realized they could, too. Within months, the team culture had shifted from everyone being expected to overwork to a more sustainable approach. Jennifer's boundary created permission for others to set their own. That's the positive ripple effect. The filter effect. Protecting your peace also acts as a filter for your relationships. The people who can't respect your boundaries filter themselves out. This can feel like loss in the moment, but it's actually clarity. You're not losing genuine relationships. You're discovering which relationships were transactional or extractive all along. The friend who disappears when you stop being their free therapist wasn't really a friend. The family member who only wants a relationship on their terms can't have a healthy relationship anyway. The romantic partner who needs you to have no boundaries to feel secure can't build a healthy partnership with you. The filter hurts, but it's efficient. It shows you who's actually in your corner versus who was just benefiting from your lack of boundaries. The modeling effect. Your children, if you have them, are watching how you treat yourself. Your younger siblings or colleagues are observing how you navigate difficult situations. Your friends see how you prioritize your peace. And whether you intend it or not, you're teaching them what's acceptable. If they see you staying in harmful situations, sacrificing your well-being for others' comfort, never setting boundaries, they learn that's what they should do too. But if they see you protecting your peace, setting clear limits, walking away from what doesn't serve you, you give them a template for their own lives. One of the most impactful things a friend ever said to me was, "Watching you leave that career taught me that I don't have to stay in mine just because I've invested time in it." I hadn't realized anyone was watching, but my choice created permission for hers. The elevation effect. When you protect your peace, you raise your standards for what you'll accept. This elevation affects every area of your life. You become less tolerant of disrespect, less willing to participate in drama, less available for time wasting, more selective about where you invest your energy. This elevation means you naturally attract different people and opportunities, like attracts like. When you value your peace and demonstrate that through your boundaries and choices, you attract others who value their peace too. Your relationships become more balanced, more respectful, more mutual. The authenticity effect. There's something magnetic about someone who's protecting their peace. They're not performing, not people-pleasing, not contorting themselves to fit everyone else's expectations. They're just authentically themselves. Take it or leave it. This authenticity attracts genuine connection. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you become something real to the right people. The ones who want the authentic you will stay. The ones who wanted the performance will leave. Both outcomes serve you. Now, I won't lie. The ripple effects aren't always comfortable. Watching relationships shift or end because you set boundaries is hard. Dealing with others' anger or disappointment when you prioritize yourself creates temporary discomfort. Realizing some people only valued what you did for them, not who you are, hurts. But here's what's on the other side of that discomfort. Relationships based on genuine mutual respect. A life that reflects your actual values, not everyone else's expectations. Peace that doesn't require constant performance and sacrifice. Freedom to be yourself without apology. The ripple effect of protecting your peace isn't just about what it does for you, though that would be enough. It's about what it models for everyone watching. It's about creating permission for others to do the same. It's about slowly shifting cultural norms around boundaries, self-sacrifice, and what it means to be a good person. Every time you protect your peace, you're not just saving yourself. You're participating in a larger shift toward a world where setting boundaries is seen as healthy, not selfish, where walking away from harm is recognized as strength, not weakness, where prioritizing your well-being is understood as necessary, not indulgent. That's the true ripple effect. You change, your relationships change, the people around you change or leave, and gradually the culture of what's acceptable shifts, all from the simple decision to protect your peace. Chapter 12. Rewriting the Narrative. From Guilt to Growth. Let's talk about the story you've been telling yourself. The narrative that says walking away is giving up. That setting boundaries is selfish. That protecting your peace means you're not strong enough to handle hard things. That quitting makes you a quitter. These stories are powerful because they feel true. You've been carrying them for years, maybe decades. They were given to you by parents, teachers, culture, religion, or past experiences, and they've been keeping you stuck, sacrificing your well-being, tolerating what shouldn't be tolerated. It's time to rewrite that narrative, not just understand intellectually that it's wrong, but actually replace it with a story that serves you better. The old narrative, walking away, is quitting. Real strength means enduring. The new narrative, walking away, is discernment. Real strength means knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Endurance without wisdom is just stubbornness. Staying in something harmful doesn't make you strong. It makes you stuck. Think about this logically. Would you tell a friend to stay in a relationship that's destroying them because leaving would be giving up? Would you tell someone to remain in a job that's wrecking their mental health because quitters never win? Of course not. You'd recognize that continuing to invest in something that's fundamentally not working is the actual waste, not walking away from it. So why are the standards different for yourself? Why is what you'd recognize as wisdom in someone else's situation characterized as weakness in your own? The old narrative. Setting boundaries is selfish. Good people sacrifice for others. The new narrative. Setting boundaries is self-preservation. Good people include themselves in the circle of people whose needs matter. Sacrifice without reciprocity isn't noble. It's unsustainable. Here's what nobody told us growing up. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't be there for others if you're depleted. You can't genuinely give when you're running on fumes and resentment. Setting boundaries isn't about withholding from others. It's about ensuring you have something genuine to give rather than performing generosity while dying inside. The people worth keeping in your life will understand this. They won't demand that you sacrifice your well-being for their comfort. And the people who do make that demand, they're exactly why boundaries exist. The old narrative. If I walk away, I've wasted all the time I invested. I have to make it work to justify the investment. The new narrative, the time is already spent. Continuing to invest in something that doesn't work doesn't redeem the past. It just adds to the loss. Walking away lets you invest your remaining time in something better. This is the sunk cost fallacy, and it keeps people trapped in dead-end jobs, failing businesses, and toxic relationships for years past when they should have left. The logic goes, I've already put 5 years into this, I can't walk away now. But think about it differently. I've already lost 5 years to this. Do I want to lose 6? 7? 10? The time you spent wasn't wasted if you learned something, even if the lesson was, this isn't for me. The waste happens when you continue pouring time into something you know isn't working just to justify the time you've already spent. The old narrative, what will people think? I'll be judged for leaving. The new narrative, the people who matter will understand. The people who judge don't know the full story, and their opinions don't pay my bills or live my life. Other people's opinions of your choices are largely irrelevant. They're not living your experience. They're not dealing with the consequences of staying. They're not responsible for your well-being. You are. And here's the truth. You're going to be judged no matter what you do. Stay, and people will judge you for tolerating poor treatment. Leave, and people will judge you for giving up. The judgment is constant, regardless of your choice. So make the choice that serves you, not the choice that minimizes judgment, because you can't control others' opinions anyway. The old narrative, I should be able to handle this. Needing to walk away means I failed. The new narrative, recognizing something isn't working and having the courage to leave is success, not failure. The failure is staying in something harmful out of stubbornness or fear. This narrative is especially strong in achievement-oriented people. We've been conditioned to believe we should be able to handle anything, fix anything, overcome anything. So when something isn't working, we double down, we try harder, we blame ourselves for not being strong enough or smart enough or capable enough. But some things aren't problems to be solved. Some situations are fundamentally not right, and no amount of effort will change that. Recognizing this isn't failure, it's wisdom. The old narrative, I owe them. They've done so much for me. I can't just walk away. The new narrative, gratitude doesn't equal obligation to accept poor treatment. I can appreciate what someone did for me while recognizing that the current relationship doesn't work. This narrative is particularly powerful in family relationships. Parents who provided for you, siblings you grew up with, friends who were there during hard times. The history creates a sense of debt that can keep you locked in unhealthy dynamics indefinitely. But here's the thing. Good people don't weaponize their past generosity to control you in the present. If someone is using "after everything I've done for you" as a guilt trip to prevent you from setting boundaries, that's manipulation, not love. You can be grateful for what someone gave you while still acknowledging that the relationship in its current form is harmful. These things coexist. Past kindness doesn't buy unlimited future access to hurt you. The old narrative, maybe if I try one more time, it'll work. The new narrative, hope is good. Perpetual hope that ignores consistent evidence is denial. If I've genuinely tried everything and nothing has changed, more trying won't change the outcome. This is often the last narrative to fall. We want to believe that the next conversation, the next attempt, the next adjustment will finally make things work. Hope is beautiful, but hope that ignores reality becomes self-delusion. If you've tried different approaches, had clear conversations, set boundaries, given things time, sought outside help, and nothing has fundamentally changed, at some point you have to accept that this is what it is. Not what you wish it were, not what it could theoretically be if everything changed, what it actually consistently is. Accepting that reality isn't giving up. It's seeing clearly so you can make informed decisions about what to do next. Now, rewriting these narratives isn't a one-time thing. The old stories will try to creep back in, especially when you're feeling guilty or doubting yourself. You'll need to actively reinforce the new narratives until they become automatic. Here's how. Daily affirmations. I know this sounds cheesy, but it works. Actively state the new narratives to yourself. Protecting my peace is healthy, not selfish. Walking away from what hurts me is strength, not weakness. Repetition rewires your brain. Challenge the old story when it appears. When you catch yourself thinking, I should be able to handle this, stop and counter it. No, recognizing something doesn't work is wisdom, not weakness. Surround yourself with people who reinforce the new narrative. Spend time with people who respect boundaries, who prioritize their well-being, who won't guilt you for protecting yourself. Their modeling reinforces that your new narrative is right. Collect evidence. Keep track of the benefits you experience from your new approach. Since I set that boundary, I have more energy. Since I walked away, my anxiety has decreased. Evidence counters the fear that the old narrative was actually correct. The narrative you tell yourself about your choices shapes your entire experience. If you walk away while telling yourself you're a quitter, you'll feel like a failure. If you walk away while telling yourself you're protecting your peace, you'll feel empowered. Same action, completely different experience, based entirely on the story you tell about it. So choose the story intentionally, not the story you were given, not the story that keeps you small and stuck and sacrificing, the story that recognizes your inherent worth, your right to peace, your wisdom in knowing what serves you and what doesn't. You're not giving up. You're making space. You're not being selfish. You're being wise. You're not weak. You're brave enough to choose yourself even when it's hard. That's the narrative that's actually true. That's the story worth telling. Chapter 13. Building what comes next. Life after walking away. So you've walked away. You've created space. You've protected your peace. Now what? This is where a lot of people get stuck. They successfully exit what wasn't working, but then they don't know how to build what comes next. The void we talked about in earlier chapters, that empty space where something used to be, can be scary if you don't know how to fill it intentionally. Let me be clear about something. The goal isn't to immediately fill the space. There's value in the emptiness, in having room to breathe, in not being constantly consumed by something that drains you, but eventually you'll want to build something new. Not to fill a gap out of panic or loneliness, but to create a life that reflects what you actually want now that you're free to choose. Here's how to approach building what comes next. Step 1. Get clear on what you actually want. This sounds obvious, but most people skip this step. They escape something bad and immediately look for the next thing without ever asking what they actually want that next thing to be. Spend time, real time, figuring this out. What do I value? What brings me energy? What kind of people do I want in my life? What kind of work matters to me? What does a good day look like? What does peace feel like for me? These aren't small questions, and the answers might not come immediately. That's okay. Sit with them. Journal about them. Try different things and notice what resonates. You're building from a foundation of self-knowledge, not just reacting to what's available. I spent 3 months after leaving that career path doing nothing productive by external standards. I wasn't job hunting. I wasn't networking aggressively. I was figuring out who I was outside of that identity and what I actually wanted to build. People thought I was wasting time, but that time was essential. It's what allowed me to build something that actually fit me, instead of just jumping into the next available thing because I panicked about the gap. Step 2. Start small with experiments. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to start exploring what resonates. Interested in a new field? Take a course. Talk to people doing that work. Try a small project. Curious about a new hobby? Try it for a month. Want to build different kinds of friendships? Join one group or reach out to one person and see how it feels. These experiments give you information. You learn what you actually enjoy versus what sounds good in theory. You discover what energizes you and what still feels like obligation. You build evidence about what direction to move in. Step 3. Build with boundaries from the start. This is crucial. When you're building what comes next, apply everything you've learned about protecting your peace from the beginning. Don't recreate the same patterns that led you to need to walk away in the first place. New relationship. Set healthy boundaries from day one. New job. Clarify expectations and limits early. New commitments. Make sure they genuinely align with your values before saying yes. Building with boundaries doesn't make you difficult or closed off. It makes you intentional. It prevents you from ending up in new situations that require the same escape you just executed. Step 4. Curate your influences carefully. As you're building what's next, pay attention to what you're consuming and who you're listening to. Are you surrounding yourself with people who support the life you're trying to build? Are you consuming content that reinforces your new values? Or are you letting old influences pull you back toward old patterns? This isn't about creating an echo chamber. It's about being selective about what gets access to your mind and energy during this rebuilding phase. You're particularly vulnerable to influence right now because you're still figuring things out. Protect that process. Step 5. Expect it to feel uncomfortable. Building something new always feels awkward at first. You don't have expertise yet. You don't have certainty. You're trying things and some of them won't work. This discomfort is normal. It's not a sign you made a mistake by walking away. One of the biggest reasons people go back to what they walked away from is that the new thing feels uncomfortable and the old thing feels familiar. Familiar feels safe, even when it's harmful. But remember, you're not seeking familiar. You're seeking better. And better requires moving through uncomfortable. Step 6. Give yourself permission to change direction. Just because you left one thing and started building something else doesn't mean you're locked into that new thing forever. If you try something and it doesn't work, you can pivot. You can adjust. You can try something else. This isn't quitting again. This is learning and adapting. The difference between this and what you walked away from is that you're noticing early when something doesn't fit, rather than forcing yourself to endure years of something wrong. That's growth. Step 7. Build your support system intentionally. Surround yourself with people who are also prioritizing their peace, setting healthy boundaries, and building lives they actually want, not people who are stuck in toxic patterns and will pull you back, not people who will judge you for prioritizing yourself. These might be new friends. They might be old friends you reconnect with now that you have energy for genuine connection. They might be communities, therapists, mentors, online groups. Build a network that reinforces the life you're trying to create. Step 8. Document the process. Keep track of what you're building and how it's going, not for social media, for yourself. Write down what's working. Notice what brings you joy. Track moments when you realize this is why I left in a positive sense. This documentation serves two purposes. It helps you make better decisions by seeing patterns you might otherwise miss, and it reminds you of your progress when you're doubting whether leaving was worth it. Let me share how this looked for me practically. After leaving that career, I spent the first few months just existing without pressure. I read books I'd been meaning to read. I spent time with people I'd neglected. I did creative projects with no goal beyond enjoyment. Then I started experimenting. I tried different types of work to see what resonated. I said yes to some things and no to others based on how they felt, not how they looked on paper. I built relationships slowly, intentionally, with people whose values aligned with mine. Some experiments failed. I tried a business idea that went nowhere. I joined a community that ended up not being a good fit. I started a project I eventually abandoned, but each of these gave me information about what I wanted and what I didn't. Gradually, a picture emerged of what I actually wanted to build. Work that helped people in tangible ways, relationships built on mutual respect and genuine connection, a lifestyle that prioritized peace over performance, time for creative pursuits that had no purpose except joy. That picture looked nothing like the life I'd left, and it looked different than what I'd originally thought I wanted. But it was right in a way I'd never experienced before, because it was built from self-knowledge and intentional choice, not from obligation and external expectations. Your version will look different than mine. That's the point. You're not following a template. You're building something uniquely suited to who you are and what matters to you. That's the gift of the space you created by walking away. Freedom to build authentically rather than by prescription. The markers of successful building. How do you know you're building something good? Here are the signs. It energizes you more often than it drains you. You're making decisions based on your values, not others' expectations. You have healthy boundaries, and they're being respected. You're growing, but not at the expense of your well-being. The people in your life add to you rather than depleting you. You feel more like yourself, not less. You have peace more days than not. These don't happen overnight. Building takes time, but if you're moving in this direction even slowly, you're on the right path. And remember, building what comes next isn't about achieving perfection. It's not about creating some idealized life where nothing is ever hard or uncertain. It's about creating a life that reflects who you actually are and what actually matters to you. A life where the challenges you face are ones you've chosen, not ones you're enduring out of obligation or fear. That's the life that becomes possible when you walk away from what doesn't serve you and intentionally build what does. Chapter 14. The Practice of Peace. Making this sustainable. Everything we've talked about, walking away, setting boundaries, protecting your peace, none of it matters if you can't sustain it. This isn't a one-time fix. It's a practice, a daily commitment to choosing yourself, to honoring your limits, to building a life that actually works for you. So let's talk about sustainability. How do you make this a way of life rather than a temporary intervention? The foundation, self-awareness as daily practice. Everything starts with knowing yourself, what you need, what you can handle. When you're approaching your limits, what's draining you, what's nourishing you. This requires regular check-ins, not just crisis interventions. Make self-awareness a habit, daily if possible. The morning practice I mentioned earlier, taking 5 minutes before you engage with the world to check in with yourself. How am I feeling? What do I need today? Where are my boundaries today? This prevents you from operating on autopilot, which is how most people end up back in situations they had to walk away from. Autopilot means not noticing the early warning signs. Autopilot means saying yes when you should say no. Autopilot means gradually compromising your boundaries until you're back where you started. The skill, saying no without explanation or guilt. This is a muscle that needs regular exercise. The more you practice setting boundaries, the easier it becomes. The more you say no to what doesn't serve you, the more natural it feels. But you have to actually practice it, in small ways, daily. No, I can't take that on. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. No elaborate explanations, no apologies for having limits, just clear, kind, firm boundaries. Each time you do this successfully, it reinforces that you can protect your peace without the world ending. It builds confidence that your boundaries are legitimate and sustainable. The framework, regular life audits. Remember the energy audit, make it routine. Monthly or quarterly, assess everything. Which relationships are adding to my life and which are draining me? Which commitments align with my values and which are just obligations? Where am I sacrificing my peace for others' comfort? What needs to change? This regular assessment catches problems early. Instead of spending years in something that doesn't work, you notice within months and can course correct before it becomes entrenched. The community, people who support your boundaries. You cannot sustain this alone. You need people around you who get it, who won't guilt you for protecting your peace, who set their own boundaries and respect yours, who remind you that choosing yourself isn't selfish. Actively cultivate these relationships. Distance yourself from people who undermine your boundaries. Spend more time with people who reinforce them. Your community either supports your growth or sabotages it. Choose intentionally. The mindset, progress over perfection. You're going to have days where you fail at this, where you say yes when you should have said no, where you tolerate something you shouldn't, where you slip back into old patterns. This is normal. It's not failure, it's being human. What matters is catching it, course correcting, and doing better next time. Sustainable change isn't about never messing up. It's about recognizing when you do and getting back on track without spiraling into self-blame. The reality check. Some things require walking away again. Just because you walked away once doesn't mean you won't need to do it again with something else. Life is dynamic. New situations arise. Things that once worked stop working. Relationships evolve or devolve. Being willing to walk away isn't a one-time decision. It's an ongoing commitment to yourself that says, I will not stay in situations that consistently harm me, regardless of how much time I've invested or what others expect. This might sound exhausting, constantly evaluating, constantly willing to leave, but it's actually freeing. Because you know you're never trapped. You know that staying is always a choice, not an obligation, and that knowledge changes everything. The long game. Building a life that requires less walking away. As you get better at setting boundaries from the beginning, as you become more selective about what you let into your life, you'll find you need to walk away less often. Because you're not getting into situations that require escape in the first place. You're screening people, opportunities, and commitments through the filter of, does this align with my values and support my peace? Before you fully engage, you're setting expectations clearly up front. You're maintaining boundaries consistently so they never get to the point of requiring a dramatic exit. This is the ultimate sustainability, not having to constantly rescue yourself from bad situations because you're avoiding those situations from the start. The truth, it gets easier, I promise you this. Protecting your peace gets easier with practice. The first boundary you set might feel impossible. The first time you walk away from something might be agonizing. But the second is a little easier. The 10th is significantly easier. By the 100th, it's just how you operate. You're rewiring patterns that have been established for years or decades. That takes time and repetition. But every time you choose yourself, you're strengthening that neural pathway. You're teaching yourself that you're worth protecting, and eventually it becomes automatic. 5 years ago, I would have stayed in situations long past when I should have left. I would have sacrificed myself endlessly for people who didn't reciprocate. I would have tolerated treatment I knew was wrong because I didn't believe I deserved better. Now, I notice early when something's off. I set boundaries immediately. I walk away quickly from what doesn't work. Not because I become cold or unforgiving, but because I become clear about what I will and won't accept. And that clarity has made my life immeasurably better. You can get here too, not overnight, not without discomfort or setbacks, but you can build a life where protecting your peace is as natural as breathing, where boundaries are your default, not your exception, where walking away isn't a crisis response but a calm decision when something no longer serves you. That's the practice of peace. That's what sustainable looks like. And that's what becomes possible when you commit to choosing yourself again and again in small ways and big ones, until it's simply who you are. Chapter 15, Your Permission Slip. We've covered a lot of ground together. The psychology of walking away, the practical strategies for setting boundaries, the aftermath of leaving, the process of rebuilding, the daily practices that make it sustainable. But I want to end with something simple, something you might have been waiting for throughout this entire journey: permission. Permission to walk away from what's hurting you, even if it looks good from the outside. Permission to set boundaries, even with people you love. Permission to prioritize your peace, even when others call it selfish. Permission to change your mind about commitments you've made. Permission to protect your energy, even from people who need something from you. Here's your truth. You don't actually need anyone's permission. You never did. Your life is yours to design. Your peace is yours to protect. Your boundaries are yours to set. But I know that sometimes hearing someone say, "It's okay," makes it easier to do what you already know you need to do. So here it is, explicitly. It's okay to walk away from the relationship that's become toxic, from the career that's killing your spirit, from the friendship that's one-sided, from the family dynamics that hurt you, from the commitment that no longer serves you. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose yourself. It's okay to set boundaries, even with your parents, even with your children, even with people who have helped you, even in professional settings, even when it disappoints people. Your boundaries aren't negotiable just because someone else is uncomfortable with them. It's okay to disappoint people. You cannot live your entire life managing everyone else's emotions and expectations. Some people will be disappointed when you choose yourself. That's their experience to process, not your responsibility to prevent. It's okay to change. You're allowed to outgrow relationships, careers, identities, and beliefs that once fit you, but no longer do. Growth means change. Change means some things get left behind. That's not betrayal, that's evolution. It's okay to rest. You don't have to be constantly productive, constantly giving, constantly available. Rest isn't earned, it's required. Protecting your energy means having downtime, where you're not accessible to anyone's needs but your own. It's okay to be done. You don't owe anyone endless chances, infinite patience, or perpetual forgiveness. If you've tried, if you've communicated, if nothing has changed, you're allowed to be done. No more tries, no more waiting, just done. It's okay to want better. You don't have to settle for relationships, work, or circumstances that are fine. You're allowed to want more than just endurable. You're allowed to want fulfilling, nourishing, peaceful. And you're allowed to pursue that, even if it means leaving what's merely okay. It's okay if people don't understand. Not everyone will get why you left, why you set that boundary, why you chose yourself. They don't need to. Their understanding isn't required for your decision to be valid. You know your experience. That's enough. I'm giving you this permission slip not because you need it, but because sometimes having it in writing makes the decision easier. Sometimes knowing that someone who's been through this is saying, "Yes, do it, choose yourself," gives you the final push you need. So take this as your official permission. Protect your peace. Set your boundaries. Walk away from what doesn't serve you. Choose yourself unapologetically and completely. The world will adjust. The people who truly care about you will understand. And the ones who don't? They're exactly why these choices were necessary. You have one life. You don't get a practice round. This is it. And you deserve to spend it in peace, surrounded by people who add to you, doing work that matters to you, building a life that reflects your actual values. That life doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice. By the choice to walk away from what's wrong so you can walk toward what's right. By the choice to set boundaries that protect your energy. By the choice to value your peace more than other people's comfort. These choices might be the hardest you ever make, but they're also the most important, because on the other side of these hard choices is a life you don't need to escape from, a life you don't need to numb yourself to endure, a life that actually feels like yours. That's what protecting your peace creates. That's what walking away makes possible. And that's what you deserve. So here's what I want you to do. Take a moment right now. Think about the thing you need to walk away from, the boundary you need to set, the peace you need to protect. You know what it is. You've known for a while. Now ask yourself, what am I waiting for? If the answer is permission, you have it. If the answer is certainty, you won't get more than you have now. If the answer is the perfect moment, it doesn't exist. The best time to protect your peace was the first time it was threatened. The second best time is now. You've read this entire journey. You have the tools. You understand the process. You know what needs to happen. Now it's time to do it. Walk away, set the boundary, choose yourself. Protect your peace. Your future self is waiting on the other side of that decision, and they're so grateful you had the courage to get there. This is your permission slip. Use it.